Welcome to the Bullpen Show, powered by Architect Sports. I'm Austin Alexander. Very fortunate today to have two special guests with us, Charlie Wentzky at the High School League and DP's Cory Welch. We'll get to those guys in just a second. Before we do, I want to make mention that if you've been paying close to our website, thediamondprospects.com, we've been spitting out all of our team rankings. By now, all of that's been put up from 5A Division I and 2 all the way to SCISA. And, of course, we've started to cover some DP scrimmages and other action you'll be able to see on our social media as we go. Just want to bring in our guests at this point. Cory Welch is a very familiar face to you guys in the DP land. But one thing we decided to do last year is just kind of have a recurring guest right here before the high school season cranks up, bring in the Deputy Commissioner of the High School League, Charlie Wentzky. So, Charlie, how are you today, sir? And thanks for joining us.
I appreciate you guys having me. I'm doing well and always glad to come on this podcast and be a part of what you guys are doing.
Cory, of course, we see each other from time to time, right? It's baseball season. How are you?
Good, yeah. It's been a while since I've been on here, but I feel like it'll be more frequent now that the season's getting underway.
That's right. Well, just I appreciate Charlie being able to come on here. And again, I mentioned the baseball commissioner over the high school league. So, Charlie, we'll just kind of start right there. One of the big things that's kind of been in the news in your office, probably been in your lap a ton the last few weeks, has been the realignment for the upcoming season. So, in the fall, 26, 27, of course, all the way through 28, realignment's going to be a big deal for a lot of schools, a lot of shifting from different classifications from one to the other, up and down. If you could kind of take us through and behind the curtain of that process, how you begin at what classification they're going to go into in addition to the enrollment and the multiplier and all that kind of thing. If you could just kind of take us, like I said, behind the curtain and what you guys deal with on your desk on a day-to-day basis, getting ready for that, and of course, all the way through the appeals process that followed this year.
Yeah, so basically it starts off in the summertime, heading into the realignment year of the executive committee determining how many classes we're going to have. Once they set that in place, then we end up getting a group of the realignment committee that basically they're gonna put together the directions for the puzzle without knowing any of the pieces. They do that over the course of 3 to 5 meetings, somewhere in there. We're getting feedback from their classifications they represent or their groups they're representing. Excuse me. They had, Coaches Association had 2 reps. Our Athletic Administrators Association had 2 reps, and then we had 2 reps from the Superintendent or Principals Association. So covering all those groups that are involved. And then their job is to solicit feedback and ideas from their groups that they're representing. And then they basically lay out how it should look, how many recommendations for how many should be in each class, recommendations for how to determine if you're up or down, if you're on that borderline. Is there any flex of 5 to 8 schools? Those guidelines get published and they don't even know the first number of where a school lands. So it's kind of being done blindly, but it's the fairest way to do it because, we're trying to do it before any names or faces are attached to anything and it gets personal. And then, during that time, we're collecting on the back end numbers from the State Department of Education, numbers from school districts, number of kids that are out of zone, number of kids that are at a magnet school that are assigned to that high school because their eligibility is there. For example, a school district has a magnet school that doesn't offer sports, but those kids can go back to their schools to participate. Well, we've got to count them in that enrollment process too. So it's not just a straight number that comes from the State Department. It's a few weeks of trying to collect numbers and data, verify it, and then get the schools to verify it so that once the parameters are given to us and then the numbers are finalized, now we can take this 229-piece puzzle and the directions to put it together that aren't clean and make it match. So what we do first is, of course, we release the classifications. And then if you don't like where you are in the classification, you then can appeal that to get out of it. But on our end, we spend, 7, 8, 10 days as a staff here coming up with the best possible scenarios for the classifications. But it's not as easy as going in and just drawing a line and saying, okay, there's 40, there's 40. I mean, if that was that easy, we wouldn't even need to sit down and do it. But we've kind of got to build a skeleton behind the scenes of what the regions would look like if this ends up being the class. And it's where we are now versus what the original skeleton looked like has shifted simply because schools have shifted classifications. And I think people don't realize that one school that shifts a classification can throw an entire classification off coming down or coming up. So it just one school can really shift an entire dynamics. I know one class lost 2 schools through the appeals process, completely shifted what the regions could have been, just because of geography standpoint, you couldn't make 2 schools their own region. So, they appeal that to our executive committee. Then if they don't like that answer, they get to go to the appellate panel, which is appointed by state legislators, and ask for that. Once that's final, we then come back and say, okay, now here are the regions. We have to kind of rework that this year a lot. And then there's a lot of tinkering. I mean, it's like moving a puzzle piece, and then all of a sudden everything, it's like Tetris in the old school Tetris. You know, you move one piece, it may fit here, but then it really causes you a problem somewhere else. Or you moved it to the right spot and it unlocks everything. So there's a lot of models, and then a lot of sleeping, and a lot of coming back and looking, and here we are, and it's now final. All of our appeals to the regions. Of course, schools can appeal their region. They don't like the region they're put in, but that's now all done. So that should be coming out finalized here. If it already hasn't, it should be coming out soon.
Charlie, I was going to ask, and I'm not super familiar with this. So 1A is now, did that kind of flip flop with what 5A was before, with essentially Division I, Division II?
Yeah, in a way, it's going to be a little bit different because 1A, we have parts in our bylaws that require you to have 12 teams that participate to offer a state championship in the class. There's several sports that 1A, they haven't been able to hold championships for quite some time, and they've had to combine with 2A. Well, we kind of want to get away from that because you really want to give those schools a chance to compete against as many like-sized schools as possible. But if you take 1A now and you move them up and say, okay, in wrestling, for example, you've got to compete against 2A schools too. Well, now you're competing against like 90 to 95 schools for a state championship. And the number from 0 and 1A to the top of 2A, that pupil difference could be 700 kids, if not more. So how do we shrink that down and still give 1A a viable chance, but at the same time be realistic and say we can't expect, the smallest school to go against the 70th largest school? Because I get it that there's a difference between a school with 1,800 and a school with 3,000. But you really start breaking things down and you say, hey, this school's got 500 and this school's got 100. That is a significant difference. Yeah, 400 difference. They've got 1,000 difference. But you got 1,800 kids. They got 100 kids, and they got to find a way to match up with a school of 500. So there's a concept that they're going to be given some abilities to split in certain sports. And we got a bracket committee now that's looking at all of our brackets to try to become a little more uniform statewide. As you guys know, the baseball brackets, it's like a matrix board of where every class is. You have to go in and, sit down and really try to figure out, okay, what is their concept here? The 5A and 4A use RPI, but they start the whole bracket different. I think 5A starts with the play-in series where 4A just goes, bam, here's a 14 pod. And then 3A is different, and 2A is different, and then 1A is different. Their H's where they go are different. If you lose this game, who gets to host in this round? It's all different. 20 years ago, it almost used to be a carbon copy. Here it is, so we're trying to get back to that. And in that process, that committee is looking at, the size of our brackets. Do we need 32 playing in every sport, or can we drop down to 24? But they're also looking at the 1A concept of what parameters can they determine to divide into 2 championship opportunities? And when they do, how many teams would qualify in the playoffs or be in that bracket? Because the interesting thing about 1A, whereas 5A now, they split in half, they all pretty much offer almost every sport there is, with the exception of maybe girls wrestling, boys volleyball. Outside of that, I think they all offer everything else. That's pretty easy to put into place. Well, 1A, you've got schools that offer 5 sports. You've got some schools that offer 8, and they all offer a little bit of different stuff. You may have an entire region that there's one volleyball playing school. So they've got to be a little bit unique and flexible. So we got to give them some flexibility, and that's what we're looking at now.
Charlie, you mentioned the different sports. I think most people that are within earshot of this podcast are only concerned about one sport, and that's baseball. Right. But of course, you guys are having to really juggle everything and all the different sports. How much time do you guys have to spend on? Yeah, we look through one lens, but you have to look through a completely different and a lot of sets of lenses. How much time do you guys have to spend on that and really evaluating how this will affect a certain sport outside of the big 3?
Well, realignment, we try to look at it just as a school-based situation. I mean, I know certain sports say, boy, if we did it this way in our sport, it'd be great. And you can't do it by sport. You can't anticipate what If it was just doing it by football, it'd be even easier. We don't have to be as concerned about geography. An hour and 40-minute trip on a Friday night, that's pretty easy. And that's not, people would say, okay, it is what it is. But when you're talking about an hour and 20, an hour and 40 trips on a Tuesday night for varsity baseball or softball, getting home at 12, and multiples of those, or a JV baseball game. You want to try to play in your region if you can. So you kind of got to keep the whole picture in perspective when you're putting that realignment together. When we're getting to the bracket side, yeah, you've got to look at every sport and be considerate of what it takes to do that sport. For example, 24 teams creates you a bye in a bracket now, no matter how you shake it out. But baseball and softball, there's multiple options. You can put them in, 4 16 pods. You can put them in 6 14 pods. You can also try to break it down to how do we do a 2 out of 3 series? Do we want to do a single game play-in to get down to 16 teams? So there's all kinds of options that you got to look at, and every sport's unique. In fact, our staff met yesterday about these brackets committee, where they're kind of heading with things. And okay, let's look at this by your sport. What issues do you see in your sport with where they're heading right now? So we can kind of put a stopgap on that road and say, hey, think about this in volleyball, or think about this in baseball. And then maybe they can pivot and come back to a better road that kind of cleans everything up, because you're trying to write a script that's going to be broad reaching and not individualized, but also not hurt an individualized sport because you went so broad reaching, if that makes sense.
Charlie, you mentioned the different championships by classification. I don't think most people realize how that's arrived at. If you could explain the process, at least in our sport, why 5A may be different than 4A, 3A, and on down. Most people probably think that's mandated by the high school league. If you could explain a little further as to how that's decided.
Yeah, I get calls a lot in the spring. Says, well, why the brackets this way? I don't know. I'm looking at the same thing you are, but the class, ultimately the executive committee is responsible and owns the playoffs. But they've given the classes the autonomy to kind of create, the brackets inside the parameters that are given. Here's the start date and here's the end date you got to be done by. Now, we're not going to say, okay, we're going to allow basketball to be double elimination. We all kind of understand some of those parameters that are there, but, kind of figure this thing out. And in baseball and softball, it's a little unique because, you've got that double elimination model. In basketball, they kind of understand a 32-team bracket. We're just going to keep playing every so many days and play ourselves down. There's not a lot of decisions to be made inside of that, other than who's going to be matched up with who to start. That's kind of the only decision they have, and what qualifies you if you are an at-large, or how do you rank the region champions and things of that nature. But in baseball, softball, you got to figure out how you're going to eliminate people for 2 losses. So it creates a little bit of I guess it gives them their own kind of autonomy to be able to kind of make those decisions for their class, and they all have a different idea on how to do it. And depending on which world you're living in, yours is the best. And also from a baseball standpoint, if I'm a coach who's winning and I keep winning, well, this bracket's great. I love this. If I lose early and I've created an entire new setback by that, this bracket's terrible, And I remember, I think 4A went to that model, what was it, 2 or 3 years ago, where they had like an enormous bracket out the gate.
Yeah.
If you lost in game 1, you had to play every other day for like a week and a
Yeah,
half
you're toast.
without losing to win that district bracket to get to the final 2 out of 3. And from a pitching standpoint, you don't really have a shot. Those that won, they didn't mind it. Those that lost early were like, man, this was bad. So they're always trying to find the next best thing. And I think it's good because it gives them a chance to have some autonomy to be able to make some of those decisions for themselves. But what's happened is it's just gotten all, it's just everywhere. To be honest with you, I mean, it's one class. If you lose the winner's bracket game and the winner of the loser's bracket game, there's a couple classes that determine who's going to be home there different. Some say the higher seeds different should be host, and some say whoever lost the winner's bracket should be host. But the classifications are different. And what we found, and ironically, is in baseball and softball, in some classes, that H was different in the same class. And they had no answer for why. It just, well, that's just where we put it. And so we're trying to kind of corral that back in and say, okay, do it this way. So that if schools move classes, or those of you like you guys are trying to follow it, you kind of get a sense that 1 through 5 is very similar.
Yeah, I like the not that my suggestion matters, but I think the seating coming off the being the home team. I like that because it puts a little more merit into the regular season
Yeah.
as well, where you see it just jump around rather than just winning or losing that one game. But
Right.
I'm all for everybody getting on the same page because Austin, as you can attest to as well, like the format for our websites and stuff like that can be challenging. And heck, there's times I don't even know which round of game I'm going to. I just know it's a good matchup.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of having one division, particularly in
Consistency.
5A. The dividing that of that classification. Of course, we'll have to do it again this year. I was not in favor of it, and won't be again this year. But glad to see that go away for sure. So, realignment was welcomed on this end. I know it was a hair pulling experience for you guys and everything you had to deal with.
Honestly, it's one of my favorite things about this job is trying to figure that matrix out. I mean, there's no answer to it, and just trying to figure out where the best fit for all these schools are. Because again, like where a school fits in 4A may impact the school you've got in 2A somewhere, right? And it's crazy like that. But it's to me, it's a I enjoy it. I enjoy that problem solving part of it.
Once the dominoes started to fall, and I'm sure anytime you make a move, dominoes start to trend a different way. That would drive me insane. So, it's good that a person with patience like you and somebody that has a desire to get that right is in that position. It's not most of us wouldn't care to do that. And one of the things we talked about last year on this, and I kind of want to revisit, was this something that was new to high school baseball, high school sports, was the transfer rule. You introduced that on this website, on our website, and this podcast last year. A year later, so now that the transfer rule has been invoked, if you could kind of revisit, if you could, just the rule itself, and then a year later, basically some findings that you've seen, positive and negative.
Yeah, so the basis of the rule is that we've eliminated all our, A through N exceptions where you've got to live in a certain school's attendance zone to be eligible to play at that school. Now, basically, it is, you've got to be able to be enrolled at that school. But there's some parameters to it. For example, when you start ninth grade, you pretty much have a pick to where you want to go in ninth grade to be eligible, and you're still sitting on 0 transfers. Even if I live in Greenville County and I went to say T.L. Hanna in ninth grade, that's my that's my school choice as a ninth grader. So that kind of falls in line with state law, allowing them to be able to make that choice. And it's still at 0 there. So, but once they enroll in or first attend a practice in the fall of the ninth grade, now any academic change after that is going to start counting on their docket, so to speak. And then you get one where if you get to that new school by a certain date, it's penalty free. And our book says 1 penalty free transfer. It is if you meet the requirements of it, right? So, you don't just get to the middle of baseball season to decide, hey, I want to make a penalty free transfer now. Well, no, there is a penalty because you didn't come inside the time frame. And essentially, if it's my first transfer, and then say I'm a baseball player, if it's my first transfer and I enroll at that new school prior to the first official day of practice that the league sets, not when the school has it, the league sets, which was 2 Mondays ago now. So if I'm enrolled at that school prior on that day or prior to that day, I'm going to be eligible in that sport if it's my first transfer and I meet the requirements of I didn't play on an outside team for that coach. I'm an American citizen or been in the United States, educated for the entire 365 days prior. I left the other stool in good standing. I didn't leave under academic or discipline issues that I'm trying to avoid, put up for expulsion, suspension, kicked off teams, whatever it is. So if you meet those 3 and it's my first transfer, then if I'm there by that certain date, I'm going to be fully eligible. If I come after the start of practice, then I'm going to be ineligible for 30 days from the first contest date. If I come after the first contest date, I'm ineligible for 30 days from the day I enroll, and I miss the playoffs. If it's my second transfer, academic change, then I'm ineligible for 30 days from the first contest date, and the playoffs in all sports that I played in the previous 365 prior to the transfer. So it's pretty clean, pretty easy, but it is what it is. It's opened the doors for a lot of kids this year to say, hey, I want to go from here to here, and not have to make those moves. But I think we're going to see less summertime jumping because a lot of these kids, we're probably going to keep seeing jumping. A lot of these kids have made their choice now. Any move after this is going to start ticking up. And unfortunately, it's already hurt some kids this year who made 2 moves inside of this year that didn't really Well, they're not eligible now for certain parts of the season.
Now, when you say contest, just for clarity, does that count as scrimmage or is that their first regular season game?
No, their ineligibility period would start with the first contest date that we allow.
Okay.
So the scrimmages they'd be eligible to scrimmage, they're eligible to practice, and let's say the first contest date is a Monday or it's actually 2 Fridays from now.
2 Fridays, yeah.
If that's that day, but they don't play for 5 days, the kid's basically now going to be ineligible for 25 more days. The 5 days they didn't play, it had no harm, no foul to the kid. So it
Okay.
could come down to a scheduling situation. And I think it says 20. I'm pretty sure it's 30 days or 1/3 of the total contest. So it's not like if your coach front loads the schedule, you're going to miss 20 games inside those 30 days. It gives you some relief on the back end of it. But I don't know many coaches that are going to front load a schedule. They may be more likely to back load it than they would front load it.
Yeah, I think well, you say that they may not, but one thing I think is interesting because it's changed now is you see a lot of teams playing in 2 like preseason tournaments
Yep.
with the number of games early on. So there are some instances where I do see some teams coaches not doing it on purpose, but getting those away early. And again, that goes into the spring breaks being everywhere. It gives you a chance to get into
Right,
tournaments.
and that was another change we made this year too that really impacts baseball is that, it used to say you had the first contest date, and then 10 days prior to that, you had that preseason window where you had to play in a tournament. And the tournament required you to play in a bracketed type event that had a championship at the end that you played in that event to get to the championship. You couldn't predetermine. But we were starting to count those as games. Those were part of your 26. The old rule, it used to be you had 16 in 2 tournaments. So it made sense to do a tournament there. Well, now people are like, I got to play in 26. You got to count these. And so we started talking like, if we're counting those games, why do we mandate they're in a tournament? Why don't we let them figure out what's best for them? Because at school A, I may have a deep enough staff to be able to go to a preseason tournament, but at school B, I may not. And instead of sandwiching all my games in the rest of the year, why don't I just go ahead and play 2 single games in this opening week they're giving us now instead of going and trying to cram in 4 in a weekend? So it's something that gives them a little bit of autonomy to say, hey, this best fits my school now. And I think what we'll see over the course of the next few years, you'll probably see more people moving away from preseason tournaments and maybe more towards preseason invitationals or preseason events that don't require that sandwich 4 games in 3 days or 4 games in 4 days.
Yeah, so kind of transition to that's a good opening. Is there anything else in baseball from a rules standpoint that going into this spring is a point of emphasis or a rule change that the general public would like to know?
Yeah, the NFHS rules that we follow that is kind of our rule book really for playing rules itself. There's 3 changes. 2 of them are extremely insignificant. One of them is dealing with what you can put on the jersey, which is, we'll now allow you to put the mascot picture on there essentially. So if it's, a Ram, I can be the school name, or I can be Rams, or I could be just the Ram itself. And I don't know that anybody ever knew that wasn't a rule before, but that's changed, and that's something that's been consistent across all NFHS sports this year. The other piece that's really consistent with all sports too is you can't wear electronic or audio recording devices during the contest as a player. And really it's trying to get ahead of kids wearing stuff to capture either action video or sound bites for the YouTube videos or these compilations they're putting together. We want to keep that out because sometimes those things might not get filtered when they get released, and you want to kind of keep it where it is. And it's one of those, you're not going to go searching a kid's body to make sure they don't have it. Obviously, if they're wearing a GoPro in their hat, you're going to see it, but it's probably something we'll see more after the fact, especially with an audio type thing, but can't do that. And then as far as the playing rule itself, the only real change, and I think it's a great change, is that you're allowed now 1 player-to-player defensive conference per inning. So the catcher won't be able to call time 6 times in the same half inning and go out and talk to the pitcher to slow the game down. You're going to get 1 of those, and really the idea there is if it causes a delay in the game or a pause in the game to allow that conference, and that's your 1 conference, and the umpire's job is to deny any further after that. There's no real penalty. It's just the answer is no. That's not really keeping the shortstop from walking in and saying, hey, make a good pitch here, and the pitcher nodding and getting back on the rubber and going in between pitches. That really didn't slow the game itself down. But if he runs in and we have to call time and stop, now that's going to be your 1 player-to-player conference. So I think that's a good change. The big change is coming next year, and we won't have to dive into
That's
it
what I
much
was about to
today.
get to.
It's the double first base,
Yeah.
the orange bag, as I call it. But it doesn't have to be orange. It can be any color, but I like to refer to it as the orange bag because it keeps it clean. But um, we don't have enough time to get into that today, so we can hit that next year. But won't have it this year. We'll be in it next year.
Yeah, I was gonna tease that because I knew that was a big one that was coming.
Yeah.
Going back though to the electronic devices, that does not include the pitch com and stuff though, correct?
No, we're still on the one way from the dugout to the catcher.
One way.
We haven't
Yeah.
expanded to the pitcher or to the fielders or anything, and I think we're in a really good spot in our space. When I say our space, the high school game itself, not the travel,
I agree.
the
Yeah.
educational base. I think we're in a good space with that one way. I think it's pick the pace of the game up. And I think honestly, when you start expanding it to other players, you're really putting yourself into a situation of haves and have nots in schools. We got some schools that they would have 18 devices within 3 days ordered. We got some that you can give them 18 years and they'll never get 18 devices just because they don't have the budget to do it nor the ability to raise the money. So you got to protect against that. But I think we're in a good space with it right now. And I've enjoyed watching it play out on the fields.
I have too, and like you said, it's picked up the pace. And I was actually shocked last season of the number of programs that do have it. Um, and that'll obviously increase each year as
Yeah.
well. But it's definitely helped with the pace of game.
Charlie, I want a little further clarity on what can be transmitted from the dugout to the catcher. So the watch that the pitcher may see, you see it in college game, and some of the defenders may have on, is that not permissible? Is it just the walkie-talkie to the catcher only to then
Well,
give the finger?
Yeah, it's any one-way electronic communication device from the dugout to the catcher, and the rule says for the purpose of calling pitches. And that's really what it's there for. But, we all know that if I've got an earpiece in, the coach wants me to go out and talk. He's going to say, hey, go talk. He's going to say, hey, bunt coverage 3. But it's, and the reason it's written for the purpose of calling pitches, it's so the coach doesn't say, ask the umpire where that was. That's what we're trying to kind of eliminate. So that's what it's there for. But no, they can't buzz it into the pitcher. They can't buzz it into the fielders. Interestingly enough, before one of my son's games last year, I was talking to a coach of the other team who was a pretty good player at the collegiate level in his own right, and one of his assistants was a pretty good collegiate player, an All-American and an MLB player. And we were talking about it, and in their state they don't allow it. They had some restrictions too, but there's some coaches pushing for it to all the players. And the former player said, listen, I just think at our level, if you let every player on the field have it, it takes away the opportunity for them to learn, especially your infielders, especially, how do you position yourself with the 9-hole up in an 0-2 count? We don't need to be pull side. We probably need to be middle backside. It's just little intricacies of the game that the kid will never understand. And he's like, I understand they're telling them at college, they're telling them at the pro level, but a lot of that, they already have that knowledge of kind of how to do it. This is more of a refined knowledge, but based on metrics and spray charts and things of that nature. Whereas at this level, they need to learn those things and not be told how to think all the time. And man, I couldn't have said that better myself.
Charlie, you kind of talked about all the different hats that you've got to wear across the different sports, different classifications, all the different things that you run into over the course of a year. What are some things that we don't know about your job and the folks, your teammates at the South Carolina High School League? What are some things that either a question you get asked a lot, some things that maybe you would like for people to know about the job that you have to do, make sure that we're able to enjoy the sports and championships on the field?
Well, one thing that we don't ever get a phone call from somebody who just straight up calls and says, hey, I want to tell you thank you for all the hard work you guys do down there. We know you don't ever hear that and hang up the phone. Now, people do tell us thank you, and people do tell us they appreciate us, but it's usually after a question or after a conversation. But it's very rarely do we get a phone call that's just a straight up, I want to just tell you I appreciate you. And that's fine. We know that coming in, we sign up for it. So, and I say that to kind of parlay it into, we're regulatory by nature here. And that's what we do. Our job is to be tough sometimes, but tough inside the parameters that our membership has set forth with the bylaws, with the rules and regulations, and to enforce those consistently. Once we start cutting deals, and become a prosecutor making deals, you end up making deals all the time, and you have to each deal gets a little bit sweeter and greater. So it's just cleaner and easier when you say, look, this is what it says. This is what you did. We're going to apply this. You don't like it. We understand. You have the option to appeal this. You have the option to appeal it further. And it is kind of what it is. And, it's tough though. It's tough on our end when you have to enforce those things and that it impacts students, it impacts athletes, it impacts dreams and hopes and realities, especially when you start dealing with having to forfeit and possibly be out of playoffs and things of that nature. So it's not easy, but it's what we do and it's how it goes. And, I don't just do baseball. I do football too. I also do soccer in the spring. So, it's a busy time around here, and it's like none of them ever stop. They all keep going. I get baseball questions in the fall. I get baseball questions about outside teams in the fall all the time. I get football questions right now about what they can do in March when it becomes open season again. So it never stops. It's just it slows down a little bit and gets a little bit slower, but the questions keep coming year round for every sport.
Well, Charlie, I want to make sure that we appreciate you. Okay,
I
we
didn't
may not
I didn't
call you.
say that to inspire
We'll,
phone calls or people to send letters or more hate mail. I just said that to kind of parlay into the fact that, we understand here what we do is not going to be received positively by everybody on the outside. And a lot of people don't think that, we care, but the reality is we really do care. It's not like we get a major violation and we're in here high five and we're so excited. It's more the opposite. It's more a very somber, like deep breath, like, cause we know what's coming next. We know where it's going to lead to. We know what's going to blow up and we know how it's going to get. So it's just like, oh, here it comes, but so but
we
that's it. I
appreciate
mean,
you so
we know
much
what we
for
signed up for. We know what we signed up for. It's like bringing that reliever in tied, but the bases loaded. He knows what he's coming into. He can't walk out there and say, I had no idea they were there, so
We appreciate you so much for doing an entire podcast about it. So thank you for what you and your team do
yeah,
to keep these
appreciate
kids
it.
on the field and give us something to go watch every night. Um, you know, you're a baseball guy at heart. At the heart, you played at the collegiate level and were a good one. So baseball, first and foremost, is in your blood. And you've got a son who plays now. He plays football. Was a good player on the gridiron as well. So what does baseball season mean to you? Obviously, you're juggling all the other sports, all the other responsibilities, but you're a baseball guy. And so, for those the folks that may be listening right now and did not know that, going into the baseball season, what excitement do you have, both as a dad and as a baseball fan?
Well, I think as a fan, my excitement is the fact that we've got so many great players in this state, especially in this class, and just being able to kind of see how it takes off. I mean, matchups and getting to see a pitcher throw against a certain hitter, you get to see certain teams develop over the years as it goes, and do some of these kids reach their expectations, and then the other part is what's the new crop? Who's the newcomers to the block, so to speak, is gonna be the next headliners coming through. As a fan, that's what I enjoy. As a parent, I mean, it's the best thing I get to do is watch my kids compete. And, baseball season for me is chaos because I've got one at playing varsity baseball. My daughter's playing varsity lacrosse. I'm fortunate that their fields, I can sit at the end of the
Yeah.
lacrosse field and overlook the baseball field and watch most of the games. I'm unfortunate that their game times and game locations don't line up more than about twice a season. And then I've got a 9-year-old playing kid pitch this spring, and I've got a 5-year-old who's going to be in T-ball. So it's like, man, I'm going to be at a ball field or a ballpark probably 4 to 5 days a week, and in all various parts of this state and maybe into Georgia with lacrosse. So it's chaos. It's busy, but man, I don't want it to end either. So unfortunately, one of those is going to come to an end this year at the high school level, and I'm trying not to think about that right now.
That's right.
Well, it's not like he's going to a bad place. So
No, he's got a great opportunity at a great place, and
yeah,
I'm excited for him for that. But it's also it's kind of tough because I remember when he was a freshman and sophomore, you just think it's going to last forever, and then I mean, here we are. We're talking about graduation stuff now, and it's interesting. It's tough to believe it got this far so quick.
That's right. Well, again, Charlie, we just really appreciate your candid responses on a myriad of topics here, and things that I believe not only we wanted clarity on and some further explanation, but also folks out there that are listening and just need to know this kind of stuff. So I appreciate you stopping in. And we said last year it went so well, we're going to do it again. And so we look forward to having you back, certainly this time next year, and just kind of recap the last year and look forward to,
Yep.
what that new realignment is going to look like on the baseball field.
I
And diamonds
appreciate it.
across the
I
state.
appreciate it. And listen, I'm going to flip the script on you here real quick. I didn't tell you this because I want to surprise you, but I want to ask both of y'all a question. And I'm going to get to be the interviewer here, okay? I'm going to ask you two questions. First of all, and I got to run, so you got 5 minutes. I got another meeting I got to get to, so you don't have long. Double A, I'll go first, right? What is your favorite DP memory or favorite moment from your time at DP or your ownership of DP?
I guess in year one, I had gone to a high school game. It was a playoff game at noon at AC Flora. I hit a 4 o'clock game in Florence, and on the way home, I thought I was done for the day, and it was pouring down rain, but I saw the lights on at Ainer High School. And I was like, well, back in the day, I would chase lights. I mean, it's late at night. At that point, I had a newborn at home, but he was in bed. It was too late to be able to see him. And I pulled in, and it was pouring down rain. And I didn't even take the gun in at first, but there was this kid throwing pretty hard. And so I ended up running back out of the car, get my radar gun. The game was in the 6th or 7th inning. It was the tail end of my third high school playoff game of the day. And he was 90-92. He had no high school. He was a high school senior, had no offers. And so, of course, had to write that up. Written up the whole day, had the first game, second game of the day, and then, of course, that game that night, and wrote it up. And his next start, he had 12 pro scouts there. Ended up getting drafted by the Braves. Ended up going to college, but ended up playing professional baseball. And I thought that was pretty cool. In year one, we were chasing down a bunch of guys, and that would probably never happen these days because seldom the guys have that kind of arm and slip through the cracks. But at that point it did. And so that was kind of the first real find, I guess, in the DP era of a guy that, whose career altered because the lights were on. I happened to see it, chased it, had a radar gun, and was able to make a difference in that kid's life. So that was pretty cool. And the first of many, we've all been able to chase a lot of guys on different fields over the years, but that was the first. I guess that was pretty cool.
All right, Cory, you're named the czar of travel baseball. What is one thing you would change? And you can't say 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. games. You got that's an easy one, but you're the czar. And you travel baseball like 6 to 17. What's one thing you would change?
Like you're talking about just rules and
you have the ability to change anything you want. What would you change?
Kind of going back to what you said when we were talking about brackets, it's just a consistency when it comes to like the brackets and things like that. When it comes to post, bracket play on Sunday and things like that, it needs to be the same. I wish, you go to one event and it's totally different. This one is another one, and it changes the entire situation of how you got a pitch count and things like that. Gotcha. Also, they do a good job with the pitch count thing, but that definitely needs to be. I see in some leagues where they do innings. It needs to be number of pitches. So, from a player health standpoint, the number of pitches needs to be emphasized rather than the innings.
If you asked me that same question, I think I would tell you I would ban travel baseball until a kid's 12, just to force them to play locally and to play with their friends and to give them more options to do different sports. But I don't get that decision. Now, last question for both of you here, in honor of tomorrow being opening day for Division I. Now, we know Division II has been going for weeks now, and I think the other divisions have too, junior college, NAIA, Division III. What is your favorite opening day memory as a player?
As a player?
Yep.
I had two nightmarish opening days. I was 0-2 at the Sarge Fry, at the old Sarge Fry field. So my opening day memories, it was great that I was a starter, but it wasn't good that I wasn't around in the second and third inning, either of those outings. I was considered Alexander the not so great to the hecklers at the Sarge. So not a lot of good ones as a player. As a coach, quite a few.
Yeah, and I mean, to me, I just remember my first one in college thinking how cool that was. But just any opening day in general, I think is exciting as well because it's a fresh start. It's the one day of the year that everybody is positive and on the same record.
At AA, my first game in college, we played at Sarge Fry. We get there. Of course, we got to bring all our own stuff for everything, right? The balls. We get ready. Carolina gets done hitting on the field. It's our turn to go hit on the field. And we realized we didn't bring our batting practice balls. We had our pitch bag, We had about 20 balls, but we didn't have, and we had to borrow baseballs from South Carolina to hit that day. And then we went and won. And our coach sent somebody back to get the balls because he's like, they're not going to let us hit with their balls tomorrow after we won.
Well, I was
That was
actually
my
there
first
that night.
college game ever. That was awesome.
Yeah,
Well, that
that's
was
pretty
my
cool.
first game, not as a college player. I was at that game
Yeah.
and bawling my eyes out as you guys came into the stadium that day. Unfortunately, the BP you referred to, they continued BP against me in the first inning. I should have just had a nail screen in a bucket myself.
So I was there many a times on that field, right there with you.
Both seasons spent the rest of my year trying to get my ERA down.
Yeah.
So those are a couple of naysayer moments for me. But but baseball season is here, and as a baseball fan, as a dad myself, and of course, whatever job it is that we have here at Diamond Prospects, I mean, it's here. I mean, the weather's starting to improve. The sun's out right now. Head out to the ballpark again tonight, and we're super excited for the baseball season to start at the high school level and all of the collegiate levels as well. I've already seen a lot of college baseball. It's rolling. Obviously, it cranks up for the Division I level on Fridays. Cory, if you could just kind of tell folks that are listening right now as we wind down real quick, just kind of what's coming up on Diamond Prospects, what we're up to, what folks can expect from us.
Yeah, so we're off and running now. We just finished our team rankings. That'll kind of transition us, in the coming weeks with our player rankings. And like Charlie said earlier, it's exciting to see the older guys, but there's some young ones coming. And I think this year you'll have the biggest impact of freshmen at the varsity level that you've seen in a long time. It's an exciting group. Along with that, we have our DP scrimmages that we've been covering. I know, Austin, you're going down to James Island. I'll be at Crescent this weekend for all the teams in Anderson and then with Florence. So we'll start kind of transitioning to, more of the coverage of high school baseball rather than, guests and things like that. Charlie, we like you coming, but for me personally, I like talking about it. And then the preseason tournaments that are coming up as well. We'll highlight those.
That's right. Well, I appreciate it, both Cory and Charlie, for joining us today on our 76th edition of the Bullpen Show, sponsored by Architect Sports. We'll go ahead and put a wrap on it. Look forward to seeing you guys at the ballpark real soon. Thank you to both of you. Let's play ball.